She fought a bandit for her purse. The cowboy said, "That's my kind of woman." The small settlement of Dusthaven lay at the edge of a vast canyon, its buildings little more than metal shacks and wind-battered domes. Despite the harshness, life thrived here. Traders, miners, and travelers had carved out existence where few dared to tread. Among them was Ilara, a young woman with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped working. Ilara adjusted the strap of her energy purse, a small but precious device that powered her personal equipment and mining tools. She had spent months earning it honestly, scavenging rare minerals and fixing old machines. In a place like Caldera 9, something like this purse was more than a convenience, it was survival. Her boots crunched on the dusty path as she made her way toward the settlement's central market. Merchants were packing up their stalls for the day, calling out to potential customers. The smell of roasted synth meat and metal oil filled the air. Ilara kept her head down, moving carefully. She had learned long ago that attention attracted trouble. Trouble arrived in the form of a shadow that darted across the ground, faster than she expected. A bandit, one of the roaming gangs that preyed on travelers, lunged toward her. His eyes were sharp, but greed had clouded his judgment. He reached for her purse. Ilara reacted without thinking. She pivoted and clutched the strap tighter, stepping back into a cluster of crates. The bandit stumbled over the uneven ground, but he didn't give up. "Hand it over," he growled, but his voice carried an uncertainty. Ilara's mind raced. She wasn't strong enough to fight him in a direct way, not in a brawl, but she was clever. Her eyes flicked around, noting every detail: the crates, a loose pipe, the uneven rocks on the ground. Her fingers brushed a small coil she had tucked into her bag for emergencies. It wasn't a weapon exactly, but it could create a loud, sudden noise. She activated it. The coil sparked, emitting a high-pitched sound that echoed off the walls of the market alley. The bandit flinched and stumbled back, clutching his ears. What is that?" he shouted. Ilara didn't wait to explain. She ran toward the main street, weaving through the scattered market goods. The bandit tried to follow, but the sudden sound had disoriented him. People in the market paused, watching the chase with wide eyes. As she ran, Ilara ducked behind a half-collapsed wall, catching her breath. She peeked around the corner. The bandit was still recovering, shaking his head, confused. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She had created her opening. A voice broke the tension. "That's some quick thinking." Ilara froze for a moment, then turned to see a tall man leaning against a hovering transport vehicle. He wore a dusty hat, a long coat, and a calm, steady expression. His eyes were sharp, the kind that missed nothing. Jax, the cowboy of Dusthaven, had arrived at the perfect moment. "You all right?" he asked, stepping closer. There was no judgment in his voice, only curiosity. Ilara nodded, keeping her purse close. I will be," she said cautiously. Jax smiled faintly. "Most people wouldn't last a minute out here. That bandit, he's lucky he didn't get more than a scare." Ilara felt a strange mix of pride and irritation. Pride because she had outsmarted him, irritation because she didn't like being seen as weak. "I didn't need luck," she said, her tone firm. "Just thinking ahead." Jax's eyes twinkled. "I like that, quick thinking, calm under pressure. That's rare. That's my kind of human." Ilara blinked at him. She had been alone for months, surviving by her wits and the occasional help from friendly traders. To hear someone appreciate her cleverness felt strange. Good, but strange. The bandit finally regained his composure and muttered something under his breath before disappearing into the winding paths beyond Dusthaven. Ilara exhaled. The immediate danger had passed, but she knew the encounter was a reminder: this planet was unforgiving. Jax walked beside her. "You shouldn't wander alone in the outskirts. These bandits, they're organized, they watch for the weak or the distracted." "I know," Ilara replied. "I've been careful." "Mostly." She allowed herself a small smile, realizing she might have underestimated how much she needed an ally with experience. They reached the edge of the settlement where the dusty plains stretched for miles. The suns were low, casting long shadows across the land. Despite the danger, there was beauty here, vast, empty, and full of possibilities. "Why help me?" Alara asked suddenly, curious. Jax shrugged, eyes scanning the horizon. "Because I've seen humans like you. You don't just survive, you adapt, you think. You solve problems that others can't even see. Out here, that's rare. That's worth respecting." Alara considered his words. She had faced hardship alone for so long, relying on her own mind and hands. To have someone acknowledge that strength felt like a spark in the dark desert night. As they walked back toward the settlement, she told him about her work scavenging old mining equipment, repairing what others threw away, and trying to make a living where opportunities were scarce. Jax listened, occasionally nodding, clearly impressed. "You're more than just clever," he said. "You're innovative, and that out here is as valuable as any weapon." Alara smiled faintly, feeling a warmth she hadn't known in months. Maybe this was the start of something new, a partnership, a friendship, or even an adventure that would take her farther than Dusthaven. The market closed behind them, and the lights of the settlement flickered on. Life continued, stubborn and unyielding, just like the humans who called this frontier home. And Alara, holding her precious energy purse, felt a small thrill. She had faced danger, relied on her mind, and come out on top. For a moment, she allowed herself to think maybe, just maybe, this planet wasn't ready for her ingenuity. Jax glanced at her one last time before tipping his hat. "Keep that head of yours sharp. You'll need it more than luck out here." Alara nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. The sun sank lower, painting the desert in fiery shades. She knew the bandit wouldn't be the last challenge, but for now she had one. Not with strength, but with cleverness, courage, and a little spark of human ingenuity. And that, she realized, was the most human power of all. The night settled over Dusthaven like a velvet cloak, and the twin moons rose slowly in the sky, casting soft silver light over the dusty settlement. The streets were quiet now. Only the occasional hum of a transport vehicle or the murmur of a late trader broke the silence. Alara walked alongside Jax, the cowboy who had saved her purse from the bandit earlier. She had accepted his company, though part of her instinct still urged caution. She wasn't used to trusting anyone, but there was something in the way Jax carried himself, calm, observant, patient, that made her feel safer than she had in months. "You know," Jax said, his voice low and steady, "most people would have run into the canyon and gotten themselves lost. Or worse, you didn't panic." Alara adjusted the strap of her purse. "I had to think fast. Panic doesn't solve anything." She gave a small smile. "Besides, running blindly is not my style," Jax chuckled. "I can tell you notice things, little things. That's what keeps humans like you alive out here." She raised an eyebrow. "Humans like me? Clever, observant, not just strong or brave, but smart. You use your brain. That's rare." His words felt strange yet comforting. It was the first time someone had acknowledged her mind as a strength instead of a burden. They reached a small, makeshift inn at the edge of the settlement. The building leaned slightly to one side, patched together with metal panels and wood planks, but a warm light glowed from within. Inside, traders and miners were eating, laughing softly and resting after a long day. The smell of spiced synth meat and roasted grains filled the air. Jax motioned for her to follow him to a quiet corner. "Sit. Have some food. You look like you could use it after today." Alara hesitated but then nodded. She took a seat across from him, keeping her purse close. "I don't usually eat with strangers." "You're not usually anyone's equal," Jax said with a small grin. "But you handled that bandit well. I want to know more about you." Alara's fingers brushed the edge of her purse. She thought for a moment. "I survive, that's all. I scavenge, repair old equipment, trade when I can. It's not glamorous, but it works." Jax nodded. "Survival, yes, but there's more to it. I can see it." Alara studied him. He wasn't boasting, nor was he trying to flatter her. There was sincerity in his gaze. What do you mean? You're not just surviving, you're adapting, learning, using the environment, not just reacting but planning. That's important on this planet, more than most people realize. She felt a spark of pride. It wasn't easy to hear praise, especially from someone as experienced as Jax. I suppose it's necessary, she said quietly. Yes, he agreed. Out here, if you don't adapt, you get left behind, or worse. Their conversation paused as a small child ran past, carrying a bundle of firewood. The innkeeper called out softly, and the child waved before disappearing into the shadows. The moment was peaceful, almost serene. For a brief time, it felt like life could be simple. But both Alara and Jax knew better. Dusthaven, like all frontier settlements, had its dangers. Bandits weren't the only problem. Sandstorms, rogue machines, and wild creatures often made life unpredictable. To survive, humans had to think, improvise, and sometimes take risks others would avoid. Jax leaned back in his chair. You'll need help, and I'm offering it. Alara frowned. Why would you do that? Because I've seen too many humans struggle alone. And because I recognize talent when I see it. You've got it. I can help you survive better. We can watch each other's backs. She hesitated. Trust didn't come easily, not after months of isolation. But something about Jax felt different. He wasn't offering help out of pity or expectation. He seemed to understand the value of partnership. All right, she said finally, but no funny business. I make my own decisions. Fair enough, he said with a faint smile. I wouldn't expect anything less. Over the next hour, they talked about the settlement, the nearby mines, and the surrounding canyons. Jax shared stories of his travels across Caldera 9 and beyond, where humans had settled in hostile worlds and survived against all odds. Alara listened intently. She had dreamed of adventure, but she had always done so quietly, alone. You know, Jax said, I've met humans on other planets who relied solely on strength or luck. They rarely lasted, but humans like you, they adapt, they observe, they create solutions. That's why humans, even here, are remarkable. Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. She had always believed in thinking over brute force, but hearing someone else acknowledge it was empowering. As the moons rose higher, casting pale light over the settlement, Jax suggested they take a walk. The air outside was cooler, filled with the scent of desert flora and distant minerals. They moved toward the canyon that marked the boundary of the settlement. You mentioned earlier that you scavenge and repair equipment, Jax said. Ever thought about exploring beyond Dusthaven? There are ruins, old mining stations, and abandoned machines. Most humans avoid them, but I think you'd find it rewarding. Alara considered it. The idea of leaving the safety of Dusthaven was daunting but exhilarating. I've thought about it, she admitted, but I never had anyone to go with, and it's risky. Risky, yes, Jax said, but also full of opportunity. And with two heads thinking instead of one, the odds improve. She smiled faintly. 2 heads, huh? Exactly, he said. Your cleverness, my experience. Together, we could handle what most humans wouldn't dare. They reached a ridge overlooking the canyon. The view was breathtaking. Rocks stretched endlessly and the wind whispered over the cliffs. Alara felt a thrill. For the first time in months, she felt like she could do more than just survive. She could explore, learn, and maybe even thrive. Jax glanced at her. Humans adapt. They survive, but some humans like you go beyond that. They change the game, that's why I respect you. Alara's heart lifted. Respect. Recognition. These were rare commodities in a world where survival often meant fighting or fleeing. But here she had found someone who valued her mind as much as her courage. All right, she said finally, determination creeping into her voice. We can do this, but first we need to plan. Bandits will come back, and there's more to this canyon than empty rocks. Jax nodded. Planning is wise. Let's start tomorrow. Tonight you rest. You've earned it. As they returned to the inn, the settlement quiet under the twin moons, Alara felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. She wasn't alone anymore. She had an ally, a mentor, and maybe even a friend. Together, they could face the challenges of Caldera 9, the harsh terrain, the unpredictable dangers, and the bandits lurking in the shadows. Alara glanced at her energy purse, now safely strapped to her side. It was more than a tool, it was a symbol of her cleverness, her independence, and the beginning of something greater. She looked up at Jax. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start planning." He tipped his hat. "Tomorrow we start surviving smarter, and who knows, maybe even thriving." As she lay down that night, listening to the distant hum of the settlement, Alara realized that the frontier of Caldera 9 wasn't just a place to survive. It was a place to learn, grow, and prove that humans could outsmart any challenge. And for the first time in months, she felt ready. The twin moons shone over Dusthaven, reflecting off her purse and casting faint shadows on the walls. A quiet thought settled in her mind. Humans were clever, adaptable, and resilient. And she was living proof of it. The morning sun rose slowly over Dusthaven, casting long shadows across the settlement. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of dry earth and metal from distant mining stations. Alara woke early, her mind alert with anticipation. Today, she and Jax had planned to explore the canyon edges and map possible routes through the rocky terrain. But the shadow of yesterday's bandit encounter lingered in her thoughts. "Morning," Jax greeted as he entered her small room. He carried a satchel filled with maps, tools, and some portable rations. His calm demeanor was reassuring, and Alara felt ready to face whatever challenges the day might bring. "Morning," she replied, fastening her energy purse securely. "We need a solid plan." "The bandits may come back," Jax nodded. "They probably will. They're persistent but predictable. They watch, they wait, and they strike when the target seems careless." Alara frowned. "Predictable, that's good for us. It means we can stay ahead if we notice their patterns." "Exactly," Jax said. "Humans like you don't just survive, you anticipate." Together, they walked toward the canyon's edge, carefully noting landmarks. A twisted rock formation, a cluster of hardy desert shrubs, and a narrow path that could be used to hide from prying eyes. The landscape stretched endlessly, a vast playground for those willing to pay attention. Alara carried a small scanner device she had built herself, capable of detecting movement and minor vibrations in the ground. Jax carried his own portable tracker and surveying tools. Together they moved with caution, their eyes scanning every shadow, listening to every sound. As they advanced deeper into the canyon, Alara noticed something unusual. Small rocks had been displaced along the trail, not naturally, but intentionally. She crouched and examined the ground carefully. "Jax," she whispered, pointing to the uneven ground, "someone's been here. These rocks, they're markers, not just random debris." Jax knelt beside her, his eyes narrowing. "Looks like a trail, but who would leave markers like this?" Alara's mind raced. "The bandits, they're trying to guide themselves or someone else through the canyon, maybe to find us." Jax nodded slowly. "Good eye. They think humans are careless, but you notice details they miss. That's why humans like you survive here." Alara felt a surge of pride. It wasn't strength that kept her alive. It was attention to detail, patience, and clever thinking. And now she realized it would keep them one step ahead of the bandits. They followed the trail cautiously, staying low and using the shadows of the canyon walls as cover. The sun climbed higher, warming the rocks, and the wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of minerals and dust. Birds of unusual shapes circled high above, their calls echoing through the canyon. After a short distance, they reached a narrow gorge that looked almost impassable. But Alara noticed a series of small ledges along the rock wall. With careful steps, she tested each one. They were solid, stable enough to support their weight. "This way," she whispered. "It's safer than the main path, and it keeps us out of sight." Jax followed, impressed. "You think like a true explorer. Most would just go the obvious way and risk everything." As they moved along the ledges, Alara's scanner beeped softly. She paused, listening. Something ahead, something small but moving. Jax crouched beside her. Could be an animal, could be a mechanical device. Alara studied the ground carefully. Tiny tracks led into a cluster of shrubs nearby. She frowned. Not an animal. Someone set this. Could be a distraction or a trap. Jax's expression was serious. Then we treat it carefully, nothing careless. Humans who anticipate survive. Let's see where it leads. Together they approached the shrubs slowly. Hidden beneath was a small device with blinking lights. Alara knelt and examined it. It's a tracker, she said. They want to follow us. Not for long, Jax said, a small grin forming. We'll leave them with a puzzle they can't solve. Alara smiled. I have an idea. She carefully removed the tracker, examined it, and then set it in a small pile of rocks, making it appear untouched. If they follow this, they'll think we're going the easy way. Jax nodded. Clever. That's why humans like you always come out ahead. They continued along the ledges, keeping their senses sharp. Soon, they reached a small clearing where sunlight poured through, illuminating a wide expanse of rocks and sand. Here the canyon opened up and they could see further ahead. Good spot to rest, Jax said. We can plan our next move. Alara sat down, pulling out a small tablet. She sketched the terrain, noting every nook and crevice. If they follow the tracker, they'll come from the east. That's where we need to focus. Jax studied the map. And if they try to flank us from the west, Alara smiled. Then we have a second plan. Humans adapt. We'll use what's here. She gestured to the rocks and natural formations around them. We can create diversions, block paths, and guide them away without confrontation. Jax nodded, impressed. You think ahead like a true pioneer. That's why humans like you survive when others fail. They spent the next hour setting small, clever diversions. Loose rocks positioned to roll and create noise, reflective panels to cast sunlight in confusing directions, and small devices that emitted soft sounds to mislead anyone following. Alara tested each setup carefully. It's subtle, she said. No one gets hurt, but it'll slow them down and confuse them. They'll think we're somewhere else entirely. Jax grinned. Perfect. Humans have always relied on brains over brawn. You prove it. Once their preparations were complete, they moved deeper into the canyon, using narrow paths and natural cover. The bandits were nowhere in sight, but Alara knew they were watching, waiting for the right moment. As the day wore on, the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows. They reached a small cave for shelter, where the walls glowed faintly with natural luminescent minerals. Inside, it was cool and quiet, a perfect place to rest and reassess. Alara unpacked a small portable meal. We need to stay alert, she said. The bandits aren't the only challenge here. The terrain itself can be dangerous. Jax nodded. True, but humans like you can turn danger into advantage. You notice what others overlook. Alara smiled faintly. I hope so. Because if we make a mistake here, it won't be the bandits who get us. It'll be the canyon itself. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the faint hum of wind through the rocks. Alara felt a growing sense of confidence. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thinking ahead, anticipating threats, and using her mind to guide their journey. After their meal, they continued deeper into the canyon. Shadows stretched long across the rocky floor, and the wind shifted, carrying faint dust clouds. Alara's sharp eyes caught movement far ahead, a shimmer that didn't belong to the natural rocks. Jax, she whispered, pointing, they're here, but they're following the false trail. Jax grinned. Exactly as planned. Humans outsmart, not overpower. And you're proving it perfectly. Alara felt a rush of pride. The bandits would be led astray, wasting time and energy, while she and Jax navigated safely through the canyon. This wasn't luck, it was careful observation, clever planning, and anticipation of human behavior. By evening, they reached a safe plateau overlooking the canyon's depths. The sun dipped low, painting the rocks in red and gold. From here, they could see for miles, and Alara felt a thrill. They had outsmarted the bandits without confrontation. Humans, she realized, could rely on their minds, not violence, to survive. Jax clapped her on the shoulder. "You did well today. Humans like you don't just survive, they thrive. And out here, thriving means thinking ahead, noticing details, and staying clever." Alara smiled, looking over the canyon. "I think we're just getting started." As night fell, they set up a small, safe camp. The stars shone bright over Caldera 9, countless points of light reflected in her eyes. She thought of the bandits, of the challenges ahead, and of the strange feeling of having someone beside her who recognized her strengths. For the first time in a long while, Alara felt confident, capable, and unstoppable. The canyon was dangerous, the bandits persistent, but with careful thought and clever strategy, humans could always find a way. And she was living proof. She looked at Jax, who was already checking the camp's setup. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "we explore further. And we make sure no one follows us." "Exactly," Jax replied. "Humans adapt, humans survive. And you, Alara, are the perfect example of why humans are remarkable." Alara lay back, the stars overhead shining like a promise. She had faced danger, used her mind, and outsmarted those who underestimated her. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was humanity at its cleverest and strongest. And she knew the canyon, the bandits, and the harsh world of Caldera 9 had only just begun to test her ingenuity. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of minerals and desert dust across the canyon. Alara woke early, alert and energized. Last night's plan had worked perfectly. The bandits had been led astray, following the false trail, while she and Jax moved safely through the canyon. But today, they wouldn't just evade, they would turn the situation to their advantage. Jax stirred beside her, already checking the equipment they had set up. "Morning, strategist," he said with a grin. "Ready to take the next step?" Alara stretched, her fingers brushing the strap of her energy purse. "Ready, but we need to be clever. The bandits are persistent and they won't give up easily." "That's why I like humans like you," Jax said. "You think ahead. Most would panic or run. You observe, adapt, and create solutions. That's what gives humans an edge even against larger forces." Alara smiled faintly. She appreciated the compliment but stayed focused. "We need to use the environment, not force, not weapons, just clever tactics." "Exactly," Jax agreed. "Brains over brawn, humans at their best." After a quick breakfast of rations and water, they packed up their small camp and began moving along the canyon floor. Alara studied the terrain carefully, noting natural choke points, rock formations, and hidden paths. Her eyes caught subtle shifts in the sand, signs that someone had been walking there recently. "The bandits," she murmured. "They're following, but they're still on the false trail, I think." Jax nodded. "Good, that means we have the advantage. We can guide them even further without them realizing it." Alara grinned. "Exactly what I was thinking." As they advanced, she pulled out a small reflective panel from her bag. Placing it carefully against a rock, she adjusted the angle so sunlight bounced across the canyon, creating a flicker that would draw attention from a distance. "This will make them think someone is here," she explained. "It's harmless, but it slows them down." Jax raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Humans like you can turn even light into a tool. Clever." Alara felt a surge of pride. It wasn't strength or speed that would win this day. It was mind, observation, and creativity. They moved cautiously, using narrow paths and ledges to remain hidden. Every step was calculated. Alara tested loose rocks that could create noise if shifted, while Jax marked safe spots along the canyon. The bandits, if they were following, would soon encounter subtle diversions at every turn. By midday, they reached a section of the canyon with tall, jagged rocks rising like natural towers. Sunlight streamed between them, creating sharp shadows and bright flashes. Alara studied the formations, thinking of ways to use them to mislead the bandits. We can create multiple paths here, she said, tracing the formations with her finger. We move through one, they see shadows or movement in another, and they waste time chasing ghosts. Jack smiled. Humans have always used strategy over force. You prove it again. Alara quickly set to work. She arranged small, lightweight devices that reflected light or created soft sounds when disturbed. She placed rocks in patterns that suggested movement along the canyon floor. Each placement was subtle, designed to confuse without causing harm. Once the preparations were complete, she and Jax moved silently along the correct path, remaining hidden from view. The canyon echoed with faint sounds, some natural, some manufactured by their clever devices. From a distance, anyone following would think the canyon was active with movement. Hours passed as they navigated the canyon's twists and turns. Alara's mind never stopped. Every step, every shadow, every sound was analyzed for clues about the bandits' position. She noted areas where they could hide, potential escape routes, and natural formations that could be used to their advantage. Finally, they reached a wide plateau overlooking a small valley below. The view was breathtaking: jagged rocks, winding paths, and patches of hardy desert flora. But Alara's attention was on more than the scenery. She noticed tracks, faint impressions in the sand that confirmed the bandits were following the false trail, still being misled by their clever setups. "They're still behind us," she whispered. "And they're confused." Jax chuckled quietly. "Perfect. Let's guide them a little further before we reveal ourselves." Alara nodded. She had an idea. Using a combination of reflective panels, soft sound devices, and natural shadows, she created the illusion of movement in a narrow canyon passage to the east. A slight shifting of rocks here, a glint of sunlight there, it was enough to suggest someone was hiding just beyond view. Minutes later, faint shouts echoed from the distance. The bandits had taken the bait. They moved cautiously, searching for something that wasn't there. Alara and Jax watched from their hidden position, quietly smiling. Humans like them relied on cleverness, not brute force, and it worked every time. "We've outsmarted them," Jax said softly. "Humans survive because we think ahead, not because we hit harder." Alara grinned. "And we'll keep thinking ahead until this canyon belongs to us." They spent the afternoon guiding the bandits through a series of harmless traps and diversions, each more subtle than the last. Soft noises, shifting shadows, and reflective flashes created a maze that only humans clever enough to anticipate could navigate. The bandits grew frustrated, moving slowly and cautiously, wasting energy and time. Alara's heart swelled with pride. She had learned to read the terrain, anticipate behavior, and create solutions. The bandits' persistence only highlighted the effectiveness of her strategies. By evening, the canyon grew quiet again. The suns dipped low, casting long shadows across the rocks. The bandits, exhausted and misled, had retreated. Alara and Jax finally descended to the valley floor, their journey successful. "You did well today," Jax said, clapping her on the shoulder. "Humans like you don't just survive, they control situations that others would panic in." "That's remarkable." Alara smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment she hadn't known in months. "We did well, it's not just me, you helped too." Jax shook his head. "I guided, yes, but the strategies, the observation, the quick thinking, that was all you. Humans like you remind me why our species thrives even on planets like this. Clever, adaptable, unstoppable." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. Recognition, respect, and validation, all in one moment. She had survived, yes, but now she throve, proving that clever thinking could outmatch persistence and brute force. As the night fell, they set up a small camp on the plateau. Stars sparkled above, reflecting off the valley below. Alara looked at the faintly glowing devices she had left along the canyon paths. They weren't weapons. They weren't dangerous, but they had guided, delayed, and misled the bandits without harming anyone. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "we explore deeper. The canyon isn't finished testing us yet." Exactly, Jack said, smiling. Humans like you survive, yes, but humans like you also lead, plan, and turn the tables. That's why humans are extraordinary. Alara leaned back, watching the stars. The canyon had been a challenge, the bandits a test, but humans had the edge. Their cleverness, observation, and ability to adapt allowed them to navigate danger with skill. She thought of Dusthaven, of the energy purse that had sparked their first encounter with danger, and of Jax, the experienced guide who recognized her potential. Everything had led to this moment, a quiet triumph in a harsh world. Alara smiled. Humans survived not because they were the strongest, but because they were clever, adaptable, and resilient. And here, in the canyon of Caldera 9, she felt more human than ever. As the twin moons rose, casting silver light over the valley, Alara knew that the challenges ahead would test their ingenuity further. But she also knew one thing for certain. With clever thinking, careful observation, and patience, humans could face any challenge and come out ahead. And tomorrow, the canyon would see just how remarkable humans could be. The sun rose slowly over the canyon, casting a warm golden light across the rocky landscape. Alara stretched her arms, feeling the crisp morning air fill her lungs. Last night's successes had given her a renewed sense of confidence. She and Jax had outsmarted the bandits, guided them away with clever devices and natural tricks, and navigated the canyon safely. But today, she knew, would be the most important day yet. "Morning," Jax greeted, already checking the equipment they had left along the canyon paths. He had a small satchel filled with tools, devices, and rations for the journey. "Ready to finish what we started," Alara nodded, fastening her energy purse securely. "We need to make sure the bandits can't follow us again, and we need to explore further into the canyon. There's more to learn here," Jax smiled. "That's the spirit. Humans like you survive, yes, but humans like you also improve every situation. That's what makes you remarkable." Alara felt a surge of pride. Recognition from someone as experienced as Jax was rare and rewarding, but she kept her focus on the canyon. Today, she wanted not just to survive or evade, she wanted to leave her mark. They began walking through a narrow path that wound around jagged cliffs. The morning sun reflected off mineral deposits in the rocks, creating small flashes of light. Alara noticed the subtle shifts in the sand, footprints, disturbances, and shadows, and carefully analyzed each one. "They're still behind," she whispered. "Not too close, but they're tracking some of our earlier signals. We need to redirect them again." Jax nodded. "Let's make this last one clever. Humans like you can outthink any challenge." Alara quickly set up a series of light-reflecting panels and small, sound-emitting devices. She positioned them along a narrow canyon entrance to the east, creating the illusion of someone moving there. She scattered a few pebbles to roll down the slope at random intervals, creating the sound of footsteps. Every placement was deliberate, designed to mislead without harming anyone. Once the setup was complete, they moved along a hidden ridge overlooking the valley. From here they could see the bandits far below, cautiously following the false trail. The devices worked perfectly. The bandits slowed, paused, and doubled back, confused by shadows, reflections, and sounds that didn't make sense. Alara smiled faintly. "They'll never catch us." "Not today, at least," Jax chuckled quietly. "Brains over brawn. Humans like you remind me why our species thrives in the harshest worlds." They continued deeper into the canyon, finding hidden ledges, small caves, and natural shelters. Alara noted every detail: shadows that could hide movement, rocks that could act as markers, and plants that indicated water or safe footing. Hours passed, and the sun climbed high overhead. They stopped at a wide plateau, overlooking a series of jagged cliffs and winding paths. The view was breathtaking. The canyon stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of natural formations and hidden opportunities. "This place," Jax said softly, "it's dangerous, yes, but humans like you turn danger into advantage. You notice what others miss, you plan, and you adapt. That's why humans can thrive even on worlds like this. Alara felt a thrill. For months, she had struggled alone, surviving by scavenging and repairing old machines. Now, with Jax by her side, she realized she was more than a survivor. She was a strategist, a pioneer, a clever human capable of outsmarting anyone. They explored the plateau carefully, taking note of small ledges, hidden alcoves, and narrow paths that could be used for future travel. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated. Alara's mind was sharp, analyzing the terrain and predicting how others might navigate it. Suddenly, a distant shimmer caught her eye. She squinted, focusing on a narrow passage below. "Look there," she whispered. "The bandits are still trying to follow the old path." "They haven't realized we've moved on," Jax nodded. "Perfect. Let them waste time. Humans like you think ahead, and that gives us freedom." Alara grinned. "Freedom is more valuable than anything else here, and clever thinking gives us that." They moved carefully down the ridge, making their way to a small cave that offered shelter and a vantage point over the valley. Inside, the walls glowed faintly with natural luminescent minerals, creating a soft, calming light. They unpacked some rations and water, resting for a short while. "You know," Jax said, "most people would have tried to confront the bandits. Brute force. Weapons, it rarely works, but humans like you think, adapt, and outsmart. That's why humans survive and thrive in any situation." Alara nodded. "Brains over brawn, observation, patience, and careful planning. That's our edge." They rested for a while, watching the bandits far below, still confused and misled by the devices and clever diversions. Alara felt a growing sense of pride, not because she had defeated the bandits with force, but because she had used cleverness, ingenuity, and observation, human strengths that required no violence. After a short rest, they decided to explore further into the canyon. The path narrowed, leading to a series of rock formations that formed natural arches and small caverns. Alara moved ahead, testing each ledge and path, ensuring that they could move safely. "This place has potential," she said softly. "We could use it as a base." "Observe the canyon, learn its secrets, and stay ahead of anyone who tries to challenge us." Jax nodded. "Exactly. Humans like you don't just survive. You plan for the future. You adapt, learn, and leave a mark." Alara smiled. She had always dreamed of doing more than survive, and now, with her cleverness and Jax's guidance, she realized she could thrive. The canyon was challenging, yes, but humans were designed for challenges. Observation, ingenuity, and careful planning were their strengths, and she embodied all of them. They spent the afternoon mapping the canyon, noting safe passages, hidden alcoves, and areas that could be used to guide others if needed. Every movement was deliberate, every choice thoughtful. Alara's mind was alert, constantly analyzing, predicting, and planning. By evening, they found a plateau that offered a perfect view of the canyon below. The twin moons rose, casting silver light across the jagged landscape. The bandits were nowhere in sight, having retreated, misled by the clever diversions. Alara felt a surge of satisfaction. They had navigated the canyon, outsmarted persistent adversaries, and done so without confrontation. Humans survived, yes, but humans like her throve through cleverness and ingenuity. Jax clapped her on the shoulder. "You did well. Humans like you are rare, clever, adaptable, observant. That's why humans thrive on even the harshest worlds." Alara looked at him and smiled. "We did well, and this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore, learn, and improve." As night fell, they set up a small, safe camp on the plateau. Stars glittered above, reflecting off the canyon below. Alara lay back, staring at the sky, thinking of Dusthaven, the energy purse that had started it all, and Jax, the companion who had recognized her abilities and shared the journey. She realized that survival wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about thinking, observing, planning, and using ingenuity to shape the world around you. And humans excelled at that. The twin moons shone over the canyon, illuminating her devices and clever setups, a testament to human creativity. Ilara felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. Humans were clever, adaptable, and resilient, and she was living proof. Jax looked at her one last time before lying down. "Humans survive," he said quietly, "but humans like you thrive. That's why humans are extraordinary." Ilara smiled faintly, feeling warmth in her chest. Recognition, respect, and satisfaction mingled with anticipation. There were more challenges ahead, more secrets in the canyon to uncover, and more ways to prove human ingenuity. But for now, she rested, confident in the knowledge that humans always find a way. And as the night deepened over Caldera 9, the canyon remained quiet, safe, and full of possibilities. Ilara, clever and observant, rested knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, and humans would once again rise to meet them with brains, courage, and unwavering ingenuity. She clutched her energy purse, smiling. Humans had survived on countless worlds, thrived against impossible odds, and carved their mark into the stars. And here on Caldera 9, she was continuing that legacy, one clever decision, one careful observation, and one bold step at a time. Ilara's eyes closed, but her mind remained alert, already anticipating the next adventure, the next clever plan, and the next opportunity to prove that humans were unstoppable. The canyon, the moons, the stars, all seemed to shine a little brighter for humans like her, clever, resourceful, and unforgettable.